Hey everybody, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. On today's John's Briefs, me talking by myself today, don't worry, we'll have Tim back on the channel real soon, just figuring out schedule stuff. But today, I want to talk about a really important issue with you that I see come up in self-defense cases all the time. The difference between can I shoot someone or use deadly force, should I use deadly force, and must I use deadly force? And I want to talk about why that is such a critical issue that you and I, as self-defenders, need to have down pat.
To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearm's legal protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearm's legal protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below.
So this is an interesting question because I get it all the time in the comments section. People will ask, well, John, can I shoot someone if X, Y, and Z? And usually they're watching one of the main channel narrations and they're going, oh, okay, they put themselves in kind of their own situation in their mind. And that's kind of the first thing I want to chat about really briefly, that we all kind of have an idea in our mind, or it seems that most of us do, of what we expect our defensive encounter to be like, what we expect it to go like. And I think that's kind of normal, right? You know, we carry a firearm and we think, gosh, man, you know, I'm going to get in a gunfight at a convenience store maybe, or somebody's going to break into my home. And we get this question all the time. And we say, well, wait a minute, you know, when would I use deadly force? And I think it's a good question. I think the fact that you're thinking about it and you're not just like, well, I don't care, I'll kill somebody at the drop of a hat. Well, I mean, of course, you're going to get sent to prison for that. But that said, when somebody says, John, can I shoot someone if, I always tell them they're asking the wrong question. I always say, never ask the question, can I shoot someone? Always ask the question, must I shoot someone? So we kind of get this paradigm. Can I shoot someone in this case? Should I shoot someone in this case? Must I shoot someone in this case? Now, there's even a corollary to that. Can I draw a firearm here and present a firearm? Should I draw and present a firearm? And must I draw and present a firearm? And the way this works out is very important in these cases. And I see this come up in some important cases. You know, we've seen cases that have been huge and making the national news. And of course, probably the two that really have been so huge in our national consciousness the last couple of years are the case of Kyle Rittenhouse and the case of Ahmaud Arbery, and particularly the McMichaels, Gregory and Travis McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan. And I've covered both of those on the main channel. I'll put links to those in the main channel. And in those, in the moment, well, particularly in the Rittenhouse case, when he was attacked and the jury decided he had no other option other than to use his legally possessed AR-15 to defend his life multiple times. So he ended up, you know, in multiple defensive shootings very, very quickly. And a jury of his peers said he didn't have any other choice. He had to do what he did. He was justified in what he did. On the other hand, the McMichaels were determined to not be justified in what they did. They are going to be in prison for the rest of their natural lives, in state prison. The feds are getting after them too, so God forbid they get clemency from the state level. They're just going to end up in club fed. And these illustrate the difference between can I, should I, and must I. Now listen, you know, we talk about even the carriage of firearms. Can I carry a firearm? And you know, I get it. When I talk to folks about the Rittenhouse case, and you know, he's become kind of a totem for the right and for the right to keep and bear arms. And I think he was legal, and I don't think, he was legal to do what he did in having an AR-15 on his person that day. Can I? Yes. Should I? Well, that's a different story. I don't think it was prudent for him to be there at all. And so the fact that he was there and he, you know, then had a gun to protect himself, thank goodness that he did. It had to be a rifle under the laws of Kenosha and under the laws of Wisconsin. So that was the only choice he had. So if he was going to carry a firearm, it was a must that it had to be a long gun. In the moment, he had to use it. So again, justified conduct. Now that said, the trial was incredibly difficult emotionally and spiritually and all those things, and has really led to some really negative consequences for the rest of his life. On the other hand, when we talk about the beforehand, when we talk about the McMichaels issue, they had seen someone that they thought looked like someone who might have potentially stolen from this property that had a bunch of different people that had come in because it was under construction. And so they decided to chase that guy. And the answer is, should they chase that guy? Absolutely not. And then again, can they chase that guy? Well, I suppose You probably maybe could, but when you corner somebody like that, you put yourself in a place that you've instigated a defensive encounter. You don't have the legal right to be there, and you end up in prison. And of course, I don't want that for any of us, right? I want good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people to act in good, sane, sober, moral, prudent ways. And so I want you to think about not only in the very small slice of shooting somebody, but also within the confines of should I be here to begin with? Is this the right place for me to be? Do I have to be here? Should I be here? Can I even be here? And those are kind of issues that we should think about and kind of work through. But really when it boils down to kind of that, not the beginning of the encounter, not the aftermath of the encounter, but that real small slice of we've gotten into a defensive encounter, and that question of can I shoot someone is really a question of am I legally justified to do so? And here's the reality of things, friends. There are times where you might say, can I shoot someone? And the answer might become yes. However, when you get into a can I shoot someone situation, you need to be ready to go through the entire process of court. You need to be ready to go through the entire process of being prosecuted, of having the civil litigation, filed against you and civil suits filed against you. You got to be ready to have your name dragged through the mud and really get to a jury and hope that the jury sees things your way, that somebody on that jury thinks that you are acting in responsible ways. And that's a very fine slice. You're basically putting the whole rest of your life on the line for, well, is it okay for me to do this? And of course, the process is the punishment. We recently saw that in a case. It's one of the cases I did some expert consultation on with Jillian and Eric Wustenberg. I mean, their whole life has been just derailed by this incident, and you want to avoid that incident if at all possible. So if I go, well, wait a minute, for instance, if somebody has opened my home door and I shoot them, well, I have a presumption that, that they meant me harm because they forcibly entered my home without permission. Well, that might be the case, but you better be ready for things to get kind of hairy, because something like, oh, okay, well, what if it was your elderly neighbor who has dementia and they opened the door because they think it's their house, not yours, and then you just don't identify them and you shoot them? Well, you might get a presumption that you believed that they were a deadly threat, but again, what's that going to do to your relationship with your neighbors? What's that going to do in terms of prosecution when the prosecution says, you know what? I think that we can rebut the presumption that that was reasonable because you didn't identify what was going on and you shot somebody who wasn't actually a deadly threat, when a simple flip of on the light switch would have given you the information to not get into this kind of thing. So when you're in the can I shoot someone, you're in real trouble. On the other hand, when we go to the other side, when we say you must shoot someone, somebody that draws a gun and points a gun at you, and quite frankly, most defensive encounters fall real firmly either over here that you absolutely had to shoot someone, or they're so far to the other side you shouldn't have shot that person at all. This wasn't okay. And so usually they're pretty cut and dried like that. Again, somebody threatens you with a gun and says, give me your wallet and all those things, and you think, gosh, if I don't shoot this guy right now, he's going to kill me or put me in the hospital. Well, now it's very reasonable to say, I had to shoot him. I must. I absolutely have to, or we're going to die. You're, the young man Eli Dickens, who's watching people die in a mall, and he says, man, if I don't shoot this guy right now, he's going to keep killing people. That's a horrendous, abhorrent thing. I have to. I must use my firearm to defend myself, my girlfriend, everyone else in that mall. You're never going to have a problem with that. When you get into a must defensive shooting, like, no, if I didn't, he was going to kill me. He was going to put me in the hospital. He was going to kill somebody else, put them in the hospital. And that's a reasonable thing, that there's objective evidence for those things. Well, now we've put ourselves over into the must. Number one, our chances of prosecution are pretty slim. You're still going to need an attorney. You're still going to have to kind of go through some of the motions. But usually 99% of the time in those cases, things are going to line up in your favor, and the prosecution is going to realize, my chances of a conviction here are slim. There wasn't anything done wrong here. You might even get a letter from the district attorney saying, we believe that your actions are justified. I've seen that dozens and dozens of times. So when we act over here on the must side, we don't end up in those problems. And so that's where I'm always telling folks, listen, if you're asking, can I shoot someone? I think you're asking the wrong question. You're going, okay, wait a minute, where can I get away with it? Where does the law allow it? Well, the law says that all over the nation, okay? So this is fairly consistent over the entire nation, that if you have objective, reasonable evidence and you reasonably believe that your life is at immediate risk, you are at immediate risk of death or great bodily harm, and that risk is imminent to you, to yours, or to someone else, then it is justified conduct. It's morally and legally justified to use deadly force to stop that threat. Now, there's a little wiggle room here for reasonable, because what a jury in Portland, Oregon thinks is reasonable might be significantly different than maybe what a jury in a rural county in the deep South might think is reasonable. So where you live might matter a little bit on this as well. Now, there is this kind of middle ground too of should I, that maybe it's not quite, gosh, I absolutely must have to right now shoot this guy. Like, I have to do this right in this moment. And well, can I get away with it? But rather, wait a minute, I have an opportunity to shoot this guy. If I don't, then the threat continues. Maybe he's threatening people with a gun. We see this in armed robberies all the time, right? That again, this guy's pointing a gun around at people. Now we say, do you have to shoot that guy? He's not actively killing people right now, but he's threatening everybody with a gun, and at any moment, he may decide to start shooting rather than threatening. So I really should shoot that guy to make this threat stop now, and that's considered reasonable as well. So when I'm in the should and in the must, I generally don't have a whole lot of problem. It's when I get over here in the can I that people start making decisions that put them in the crosshairs of prosecution and also get them to make wrong decisions. This is when we see things like, I had this case on the channel a couple of years ago involving Marquez McLaughlin and Michael Draka. And if you remember, I'll put a link in the description. Marquez McLaughlin had gone into the store. His girlfriend stayed in the car, and Marquez and their son went into the convenience store to get some soda or something. But she had parked in a handicapped parking spot, and Michael Draka pulled in to be a customer at the convenience store as well. And he sees her in that spot, doesn't like the fact that she is in a parking spot for handicapped people without a handicap placard. His mom had had a handicap placard, made him mad. So he tells her she needs to move. And she's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. Well, McLaughlin didn't know anything about that conversation. He comes rushing out and pushes Draka to the ground. Draka draws a pistol and points it at him. And McLaughlin puts his hands up and takes a step back. And over about a second and a half, he takes a full step back with his hands in the air, backing up. And after that second and a half, Draka shot him. He was convicted of manslaughter in the state of Florida and sentenced to 20 years for that. Now, of course, the jury decided, can I shoot that guy? No, you can't shoot that guy because his hands are in the air and he's retreating. He is not in that moment a deadly threat. And so that illustrates the point that can I, should I, must I changes second to second. This is a small slice thing of, is it this threat imminent? Is it right now? Not is it later, not will it come, not was it before, but is it right now? Did you have to use your firearm in self-defense? And that hesitation and the fact that his hands were up and backing away made the jury decide, no, you can't shoot that guy because there was no immediacy to the threat. And that's something you got to think about as well. And that's why, one of the things we talk about is that you got to make good decisions with a firearm in your hand. That marksmanship skills are important, and you need to get to gun school so that your skills are up to par. And I even think that Draka, when McLaughlin pushed him to the ground super hard, and he did, it was a violent shove, it amounts to assault. He's now grounded, and he draws the gun and points it up at McLaughlin, who was kind of towering over the top of him. And in that moment, I think that was a reasonable action. And had McLaughlin stood there menacing or even advanced, then I think it wouldn't have been any problem whatsoever. I think then you say, hey, wait a minute, if the facts are a little bit different and he's coming this way at me, now the circumstances change, and in that instant, you must shoot him. Or you're going to be going to the hospital because you can't go anywhere, and this big strong man, and you're not a big strong man, is assaulting you and stomping you into a mud puddle. But the fact that he put his hands up and then backed away changed everything about it, and only changed it over about a second and a half. So let's think about the fact that the jury, the finder of fact in our society, is going to ask you to make reasonable moment-by-moment decisions. Not perfect. You're going to get some benefit of the doubt because what did you reasonably perceive? And what would a reasonable person who knew what you knew do in that moment if they were in your shoes and equipped as you were? That gives you a little bit of benefit of the doubt. But I want us to really recognize and think about the fact that the can I is not the question to ask. I just don't want you to ask can I. I want you to ask must I. So when we say something like, well, if somebody's got a knife and they're threatening me, can I shoot them? Well, I mean, the question is, are they really objectively, reasonably a deadly threat imminently to you and yours? Because, the scenario we all think about is somebody, you're coming out of the bank or something and somebody points a gun at you and says, give me that wallet that you just put a bunch of cash into. Well, now we're in a must-die if you can launch a counter-ambush effectively. On the other hand, if the neighbor next door is pissed off at you and she's 85 years old and uses a walker and she's walking down her driveway at you because you're standing out there getting your trash can or something, and she's like, I'm going to cut you deep, fool. And she's got a knife in her right hand that she's holding her walker with and going, I'm going to get you and you're going to pay for all the times you mess with my trash can. And she's coming at you and you go, oh, she's coming right at me, and you draw a gun and you shoot her. Did you have to shoot her as an 85-year-old woman? She can't get to you with a knife. Now, I might say it would be different if she had a gun. If she had a gun and she said, oh yeah, well that's it, and she's got a gun in her hand, an 85-year-old woman could work a trigger just as well as a 25-year-old man. But if she's got a knife or a baseball bat or a crowbar and she's a ways away from you, she ain't gonna hurt you with that thing. And so the reasonableness changes significantly. What does all this mean? Be a good, sane, sober, moral, and prudent person. Use your firearm as a tool of last resort, as a shield and not as a sword. We use it to defend ourselves against an imminent, immediate threat of death or great bodily harm, not as a punishment tool. We protect, we do not punish. These are the ways that we use those things, and that will keep us away from the can I question and lead us over to the must I question. I want you to put that deeply into your soul when you're talking about self-defense, so that you use deadly force only when appropriate, you don't get punished by the process, and you maintain your place in your community as a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. Hope it helps you.